What are we listening to, Daniel?
This is Christ in the Mount of Olives, composed by the one and only Beethoven.
Dang.
Yeah, I think this is a really great example of, kind of inspired art by Christians, for Christians, to inspire awe in God. And I think, it's a great topic to talk about, this was composed back in the early 1800s and kind of where Christian media is today.
Wow. What do you think, Trey? Should we talk about that?
I'm definitely awe-inspired, so yeah, let's dig into that.
There it is. We should have a montage of all of our guests doing that. All right. Annie, count us in.
Wait, who's saying welcome to Tipsy Theology? Welcome to the Tipsy Theology Podcast. We got a special episode for you. This is the first time that me and Paul have both been on the show for a guest episode.
It's true.
So why don't our guest introduce himself?
Introduce yourself.
As all guests do.
Of course.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I am a filmmaker, artist from the state of Ohio, and I'm here to kind of talk about, my perspective on Christian media, as I am a Christian who makes art, and hopefully at some point in my career, I'll be making some Christian art.
Yeah, and Daniel's also one of my best and closest friends in the whole world.
Aww.
And he's here to talk about Christian media.
Yeah.
Hooray! But anyway, before we get into
Daniel, let me ask you before we get into it. Sorry to cut you off,
Well,
Paul.
we're going to start pouring shots, so you can ask him. This is the time
Well,
to
that's
talk.
the thing. I was going to ask him, are you okay with that? Did you sign the disclaimer? Or?
Okay with what?
The shot disclaimer.
I guess
we have to ask.
We have to ask.
Okay.
For legal reasons.
You drove me here, so yes. Yes, I am fully aware, and I am not under any narcotics in any way that I
You did just take an Advil, though.
That sounded really
I
suspicious.
just took pills. I'm just, it opens with me like reading a piece of paper. Like, I am not under the influence of drugs in any way, that I fully sign off on taking 3 shots.
Actually, I want to do this one last.
Okay.
I think it'd be fun.
Okay.
Because it's like we have BT, and then we're going into more BT.
True.
Yeah, I wish I had some Buffalo Trace with me right now.
So we're going to start with... Let's start with this one.
Okay, because if that one's the worst, let's start with the worst.
It might be.
We can hopefully, if it's bad, we can wash it out of our...
So this, as you know, Trey and I are like huge vodka people.
Nope.
And so I went out and bought a bottle of vodka. Because the bottle looked really pretty. It says Vincent Van Gogh.
Well, he was an artist.
Acai blueberry.
Wow, so
Perfect.
we're
Yeah,
very
that's
much
good.
into like the art side of it. Ooh, and it's purple. Yeah. All right.
And there we go.
Wait, it's purple vodka?
Yeah, because the blueberry
right.
and the acai.
Wow.
I feel like a white little like basic white girl when I say.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like a salad, but vodka. But Trey, you're not doing shots with us? You got some?
Oh, he's got some.
Yeah,
What do you
I got a
shot?
shot right here.
There he
It
is.
is vodka. That is
all right.
Russian vodka.
It's
Just potato
yes,
vodka.
cheers.
Yep.
Cheers.
Cheers. I like that.
It's actually not bad.
Yeah, I definitely taste the blueberry, but it's not overwhelming.
Yeah. The vodka, like the alcohol flavor, you feel it, but you don't taste any of it.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
And that's the best thing that can happen to vodka, is you don't taste it.
You do feel it.
You do feel it. Yeah, so I think that's kind of fun.
Okay.
I might drink some more of that.
What do we have next?
So this one is Fernet. This is the other one. Trey and I had this last time. I don't know what we're doing with that one. We had the Menta. This is the Branca.
Branca.
You had it last time.
Branca.
Yeah. So
I
this one's
didn't have
got
it
like.
last time.
Oh, that's true. I had it last time. You're right. Dang it. I keep forgetting.
Yeah,
It's so sad.
I know. It's like I'm there.
It is. It's like you're here. So this is like just a whole bunch of herbs and stuff.
Mm.
I think it's Is it? I don't know what the base is.
That's got an interesting smell to it.
But it's like, yeah, like everything you can imagine is in there.
I know you've already done this a lot on the podcast, but you're going to hear that a lot. This episode is, that's interesting.
That's interesting. Huh.
That's something we say
Interesting.
every 10 seconds, probably.
yeah.
But hey, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, Trey.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that one was the worst.
Really? Because I actually really like it.
I don't like
It's
that.
powerful because there's a lot.
Yeah. That, you ever get those cough medicines that, like, have the herbs inside?
It's a little like that, yeah.
That feels like that was liquid, like the herbs, if you just made them a drink. That's what I just had.
Well, initially I think it was like they use it for like medicinal stuff. Cause it's just a whole bunch of herbs. Like you're sick, take a shot of that.
Yeah. So my only memory is like tasting that is whenever I'm sick and feeling horrible.
Oh.
So literally as that's going down, I'm just
So you
like,
just had, like-
yes, I remember having strep
Oh yes,
throat.
I'm sick. Well, so it's funny because my cousin likes to take a shot of it typically every night, like after meals and stuff. Because after you eat and then you take a shot of that, you feel like you hadn't eaten yet. It's really weird. Like
I need a palate
calms
cleanser
you
with
out.
some potato chips.
some russet, right? Chips.
Yeah, dark russet potato.
Can you hear this, Troy?
Oh, I hear it very well. I'm really jealous.
Well, hey,
Those are like the best chips.
Hey, he knows.
I haven't even had.
No, they really are.
haven't had
They're so good.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Daniel, before y'all take the shot, I have one more question I want to get into.
Sure.
You know, because we do this podcast, and the more controversial element of it is the drinking part. So I want to ask you, what is a good and healthy approach to alcohol? What's your take?
I think alcohol should be enjoyed and never used as a treatment for just about anything, unless maybe it's like, I don't know, you're treating a wound, or or maybe you're like on the battlefield and the only thing someone has is a flask right before they're about to cut your leg off.
What about heart wounds, Daniel? What about heart wounds?
Yeah, what if you're like really sad?
yeah. I think that's totally the optimal time to like really, let yourself. Yeah, I just feel like you should never.
Actually, after that answer, I'm gonna.
My approach is like I never consume alcohol when I'm in a vulnerable state. If it's ever there to treat an issue, then that's the last time I should be consuming it. But when I'm in a good state, then I'm all for it. And never to
Good answer.
Yeah, never to like totally drunkenness level. If I black out, I also think I went too far.
Well, so with James, our last guest we had on, our good friend Jameson, one of the things he was talking about was he's uncomfortable drinking in public because of the image that it can present to some people. So how do you feel about that? Obviously, you're drinking in public right now.
Yeah, I am. That is a good question. I think, again, it's like, I think of like the sophisticated man like drinking a brandy or something like that, and I'm okay with an image of, again, it being like a treat enjoyed during a good time. But like, if I'm out there getting drunk on like cheap beer and I'm putting out an image of like alcohol being used irresponsibly like that, then I probably would be uncomfortable. Drinking in public in like a setting.
As an overall, you're like, I'm fine if people see me drinking, but just the context of what it looks.
I'm okay
what it
with
is.
people seeing me drinking, like at least like this. So,
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've just approached it. So.
Well, anyway, cheers.
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 Good old Buffalo Trace.
Dude, that's the original vanilla.
All right, and then Paul.
It's just like, all right.
I gotta work later. I'm like, we're going on vacation.
But hey, you gave us a request today for what you want to drink.
I wanted to drink. I've had a Moscow Mule, but then I actually just learned about the idea of a Kentucky Mule, which sounds way better because instead of vodka, it's my favorite, which is whiskey. So
Yeah.
it sounds like the best of both worlds.
So we have Kentucky Mules today. And I'm jealous because
Kentucky Mule.
Trey's glass looks way
to
better
cool
than
him up.
ours.
Yeah, I'm jealous of Trey's cup there.
Got the hammered copper right there.
Yeah.
But Trey, what did you use for your bourbon? So we used Buffalo Trace.
I used my Chattanooga bourbon, my Chattanooga whiskey,
Ooh.
because that's all I got right now.
You have to share some of that this week.
Yeah, I can bring it if you want.
I'm bringing my Buffalo Trace.
Yeah. So it'll
Okay.
be it'll be a great time.
Oh, bring the absinthe. Do not forget the absinthe.
Yes, I've been wanting to try that so bad. So for my birthday, Trey got me a bottle of absinthe with like a gorgeous spatula. Yeah, Trey and Chloe came through on that.
Nice.
You're welcome. I know what you need.
And it had a picture of Van Gogh on the front too. I was like, how does this get better? But I'm very excited to try it.
Yeah, no, it looks beautiful.
Well, I was telling Daniel earlier when we went out and bought the Buffalo Trace, I was like, it's funny because I feel like the last few times Trey and I have it was a weird episode where we cried. We've had absinthe.
Yeah, and after my experience recounting silence to you, that's probably not a good idea.
So the all absinthe show is going to be a little interesting when we do that one.
It's just
All
gonna be a cry
absinthe
fest.
all the
Nothing but
time.
absinthe. But hey, cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, cheers.
Wait, how do we do this before? I gotta go.
Clink.
Like,
That ice definitely melted in there.
yeah, I kind of watered it down a little bit.
It looked like a lot.
A
Wow,
lot.
that's good.
I know how to fix it.
Paul,
Yeah.
Paul, that'll warm it up.
Yeah, so I had to transport some ice and it melted.
Yeah.
Do you want? I think we have another ginger beer. I can pour some of that in there. That'll bring some of the bubbles back at least.
Okay. Yeah.
But okay, I won't move. But anyway, Christian media.
Yeah, Christian media.
It
Yeah,
makes me laugh
so-
because it's popular. It's like Nickelback. It's popular to hate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a big effort in the 90s to kind of make it cool and make it mainstream. And,
what if it was hip?
And the fallout of that today is
you.
it's Nickelback.
But I'll say for myself, and Trey, I want to hear you say your thoughts about it overall, and then we'll let the experts start talking. But I know for me, it's like, okay, so it's a huge range of things. Even trying to define it is kind of confusing. But I guess when I typically think of Christian media, we think of the really pop, mainstream Christian artists,
Mm-hmm.
and then Christian movies like the. I don't know if I can name names. I guess I can. Like the God's Not Dead or Fireproof.
Oh yeah,
And
Fireproof.
what is the other
yeah.
one? Flywheel. Like those guys.
I don't know, Flywheel.
I think it's the same dude.
Okay. They all
But-
like the kind of pure flicks and
Yeah.
crowd. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of that stuff when it comes to movies. When it comes to music, it's like, oh, what do they play on the radio?
Mhm,
You've got
yeah.
Francesca Battistelli or Mercy Me and Mike's Chair.
Yeah, whatever's on the fish.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So I think of stuff like that, and I've got a lot of opinions, but overall, it's a little cringe.
Yeah, I think the word to describe it usually is cringe.
But Trey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's I think cringe is the right word to use there, and I think it's also their Christian media is so much larger than those popular stuff on the radio and the God's Not Dead, Fireproof type movies that you were talking about. But at the same time, those are also the most popular manifestations of Christian media.
Yeah.
So it's worthwhile to critique them and to study them and try to understand what's going on with. Why do they think this is a good way to express the faith, right?
Yeah.
Why? I don't.
Just
I don't want to.
let's
I don't
just
want to
shove it down
get
their
up here
throat.
and rant.
Yeah. There's time for that.
And I will say, from my experience, my least favorite genre of movies and music are the Christian type.
Yeah.
But my most favorite are those that my favorite music and my favorite movies are those that are not nominally Christian, like not Christian media, but often they're created by Christians. But
Yeah.
it's this implicit religious theme that comes through. That's what strikes me as, well, awe-inspiring, really, and moving, right?
Yeah, it's interesting how. There we go already.
Interesting.
my first words opening up.
Can we put a counter? Put a counter down on it?
Just a ding. But yeah, the way that you're talking about how, and I hear this from a lot of Christians, of being like some of the best Christian media or like Christian values comes from non-Christian sources, or it might be an artist, but they're making something that is not explicitly, evangelizing or something like that. And I do think that is pretty common amongst a lot of people. That it's usually when it's not purposefully trying to, we use the word propaganda. It's not purposely trying to send out like almost a political message in a way.
Yeah.
Is where you find true art, true beauty, true messages of someone's values. So, yeah.
It's funny because I know when it comes to, I think I heard someone tell me about this in an interview, so this is like third-hand news at this point. But I thought it was like the guy who made a lot of those like very popular Christian movies. One of the things that he said, he's like, I'm not trying to make a good movie. I'm trying to make a sermon in a movie format.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, all right, well, that changes it.
Yeah, I do know there was a presentation done by one of the guys who worked with the producers on like Fireproof and those types of movies, and I think God's Not Dead as well. And he said how they personally identify, and they fully admit this, that they're like, we're not filmmakers, we are not artists, we are preachers, and we are making sermons as movies. And so in that, it has already on its own removed itself from trying
the whole
to
genre.
trying to be an attempt at like an artistic expression.
Yeah.
Purely being a vehicle for like a political message. So, yeah.
Well, especially with God's Not Dead, like that movie specifically, you start out with this strawman atheist professor who does not have the real, true arguments that those types of people in real life are bringing.
And my favorite is like the premise of it alone would never happen.
Yeah.
The premise
exactly.
Of like he's like, we're gonna throw the curriculum out, and you need to write down a piece of paper. God's Not Dead. It's like, all right, it's an interesting story, but that would never happen in real life.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a similar.
No way!
Hey,
No way! Just throw my argument away.
So when I was going to,
Actually.
this is funny now because I was so conservative at the time. It made me mad. But when I was in high school, I did some dual enrollment at the community college, and I had a professor who I couldn't stand, so I dropped his class. And then I found out a week later that he made the students write down F Donald Trump
No way!
on a piece of paper. So that's as close of a story as I can get.
Wow.
That one makes
But,
more
I mean,
sense though compared to the two.
That one makes it makes a lot more sense,
could
but at the
see
same
that
time,
happening
still
over-
not warranted.
Yeah.
Still,
Yeah, that's I feel like that's sort of an abuse of power in a
Right.
teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
In a
Exactly.
position of being a teacher. But
And Trey's like, it's not that I don't want to write it. I just realized.
and you know what?
yeah, it's not.
Well,
it's whatever my opinions are, it's kind of. I do feel uncomfortable that you're forcing all these people in this room to do it.
He's just the
No, at the
contrarian.
time it made me mad.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, I remembered that, and I was like, you know what? And I got out a piece of paper, and I wrote it down, and I sent him it in a letter.
And you mailed it to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He's like, what is this?
Anyways.
But yeah,
I didn't
back to it.
need to name drop him.
Yeah. So I know we were kind of talking about like going back to the origin, sort of trying, of course, like a good Christian movie, we're gonna try and solve the problem. But unlike all these other Christian movies, I don't know if we'll have a solid answer, but we can provide our perspective. And so, yeah, I think that, a good note that I kind of came away with when I was trying to do my research coming into this, the little bit that I did, was that, throughout history, it was like you had these great artists, Beethoven, Michelangelo, Leonardo, every great artist worked for the church. Now, that was for both economic reasons as well as faith reasons as well as political reasons.
Yeah.
With a theocracy that kind of ruled at the time. But at the end of the day, when those churches, commissioned art to be done, I think a big consistent theme that you saw was that the goal was first to impress and inspire awe in those who saw it and witnessed it.
Yeah.
And to do that was to be like, let's make some of the best, most beautiful looking art that'll stand for centuries, And there was a shift that happened. And I don't know, I've heard a lot of claims, but I haven't been able to find a lot of solid evidence. And I'm sure it's out there that the shift happened during United States evangelicalism in its early years, of a shift from that being we are first here to make, beautiful, awe-inspiring art, and shifting over to let us use art to evangelize the gospel.
Oh.
And in that shift, in that fundamental shift, as an artist, I know that, and we'll get into this moving forward, but when you suddenly start to restrict it to a very specific way that it has to be said and it has to be put, you're already setting yourself up for failure. At the very least, you're making it way more difficult to create something of artistic merit.
Yeah. Well, so I'll ask too. So, removing the idea of the propaganda side of it, we're just talking about the art, because there are people out there that, regardless of the God's Not Dead people who are clearly just making sermons into movies. It's there are people making just as equal quality, no matter the budget. There are some people. Some of those movies have several $1 million budget.
Yeah.
And some people have a couple $100 as a budget. But it's the quality's about the same overall. So it's so with that, it's okay, so let's look at the art side of it. It's what is involved with that, making the art?
And you just mean this in general? Not
just in general.
Well,
so we'll talk about movies right now, since that's
So my background is filmmaking, and I've been the cinematographer and sort of a production assistant and stuff on small independent films and stuff in Ohio. And so from my experience, I know, and I've said this before, that it's okay, you start out with the goal of you want to make a film, right? Just a feature-length film. That's it. Okay, that's already very difficult to do. Okay,
yeah.
I haven't even brought in the word, I want to make a good or a quality, feature film. It's just you want to make something that's let's say an hour and a half long. That is alone a huge task. Now you want it to be a film with a narrative and it has actors in it. Okay, so now you got to find people who are willing to act in your movie, people who are, someone who's willing to hold a boom pole. You have to pay these people. You have to find someone who's, good at photography and can make it look nice. These are already difficult challenges. And you'll find that, we talk about bad Christian films. There are plenty of terrible movies that came out just last year that, were not Christian films. Hollywood produces them, all the time.
Yeah.
And so now you already see that I keep saying Ohio. Hollywood. Yeah, Ohio has a big
beating up on
issue,
Ohio here.
But Hollywood already has a very difficult challenge of making good movies. You can listen to tons of film critics talking about all the issues with Hollywood.
Yeah.
Oh, there's nothing, originality is dead, and they just make sequels and they just make remakes and stuff like that.
Even the thing with color correcting, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's there's people went on massive tirades for months about they didn't color correct these movies.
Yeah, there's a whole debate about the coloring of the Marvel movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So on top of all that, right, this is just purely on a statistical level. Now you add on, so we already know that Hollywood struggles with that. You add on an additional modifier of it has to promote Christian values. Okay, well, you've already taken this incredibly difficult challenge and made it even harder because now the pool of talent that you can reach out to has been restricted.
Yeah.
And the goal that you're trying to do has shifted from, I want to make a good movie, a quality movie, a movie that, is artistic or has artistic merit, to I want a movie that does that, but does it in this specific way that it, you're just already sort of, I wouldn't say you're setting yourself up for failure. I do think it's possible, but you are making it so incredibly difficult. I don't even think it's like on a factor of 2. I think it's like a factor of 10 that or more that you are, making that even more difficult. And so the people who are you're going to find who are like, yeah, I want to make a Christian movie, a film that, inspires Christian values and are also, so they're just alone that are willing to do that are going to be like very stark evangelicalists, the type of people who are going to want to make like a movie like God's Not Dead.
Wow.
But then to find artists who want to explore these ideas and ask questions and tackle more difficult subjects, you have to cast a wider net, to find those people.
Yeah.
So that just purely on like an economic level, already sort of, I think, explains some of why Christian media is bad. But obviously we can go deeper into the criticism of like what, songs and movies are trying to accomplish is already sort of
because it seemed like there was a point where it kind of fell behind. It's like you've got basically religion leading the way as far as art goes. They're constructing these gorgeous buildings. They're making this fantastic art. This incredible masterpieces, and then all of a sudden it's like popular culture, secular culture, we'll even say, is like that kind of caught up and then progressed forward. And it seemed like Christian religious media kind of like fell behind, and now we're kind of in a place where it's just copying what's good. It's like we have Mad Max, and then you have Waterworld, which is not a Christian movie, but it's like, all right, what if we had Mad Max but it was water?
Yeah.
And then you have Pureflix, like, what if we had Mad Max but it's awful?
Revelation Road.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's funny. It's like, why does it seem like we see these artists, it's like, there's an industry behind it too. Let's not ignore that. But it's like, instead of being like, hey, why don't we get back to the forefront of creating, there's like, what if we just copy what's good and just make it not as good?
So I think you're really hitting on a point here that I wanted to mention, which is like, you're just talking about architecture, right? And like the beautiful kind of Gothic churches that we had back in the day. Now, you look at like maybe a Hillsong church. You'll notice that, these mega churches and sort of the business mindset, because, church is a business, that these mega churches have is quantity. It's all about mass and just volume. So these churches start to just get more and more like a box. How many people can we fit in here? How many services can we have, like, kind of people coming through? It's less about quality of salvation and more about quantity of salvation. You think about when you were a kid or something, or you go to like these these kind of like youth events or something where they would want to kind of be like, oh, so many people were saved tonight, or so many people were saved last week. And I don't ever want to criticize someone's salvation or kind of like, put it down or something like that. But you do know that some of those people might have said something in a moment, but if you kind of follow them, even just a few weeks later, there wasn't much change that happened, and it was like, there's like sort of that, in some churches and really in a lot of churches, there's that focus more on numbers and volume than there is on quality of relationships.
Because we care more about hearing someone say what we want them to say as opposed to following up and discipling that person who claims something.
Yeah. And changing hearts and minds and is a much more, well, I mean, you had an episode on kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word. Not being a psychologist, but being a counselor. Counseling. You know, it's like that that is not like, oh, well, how do I change someone to make them better? Or like, how do I, what questions do I ask them to like make them, completely change and be a different person? You're going into it with the wrong mindset, sort of. So, in a similar way, it's like, how do we make a movie that, sort of like, not just brings people to Christ, but it's like, how do we make someone, believe in our Christ? So.
I want to go back to architecture for a second, because I think it, especially with like, this is just coming to me with the megachurch, but thinking of these beautiful cathedrals that were being built in like from the time of Christ up until, Protestantism. I mean, there's a couple of things that we could explain for why churches are the way they are now. Like,
sure.
Like the Protestant churches, the Protestant church has a much lower emphasis on beauty in general, and therefore in their architecture, it explains, it shows that, it reveals that. But also, this is really upsetting me with the megachurch, is they don't take the time to build a beautiful building. They take the time to build a building they can fit as many people in as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because and why should they build a beautiful building? Like, these cathedrals would take 100 years to build.
Yeah.
Because there was something deeply significant about the building itself and how it pointed toward the absolute God. But with these megachurches, we don't need to build a beautiful quality building. We just need to build an efficient building, because in 20 years, when the pastor steps down, that church is just going to fall apart.
Right.
Because the mega church is built up around this
a
pastor.
singular person. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that too. You made me think about even the whole argument and kind of concept about making something flashy. So it's like, we have the people, it's like, yeah, we see these gorgeous buildings with like incredibly ornate stained glass windows and like, railings or whatever it is, ceilings are like really intricate. And we're like, that's beautiful, that's awe-inspiring. But if you have like a light and a fog machine on stage, it's like, how dare you Satan worshiper? And it's interesting with that. It's kind of like, it's something I'm thinking about right now as we're talking. But it's like, isn't that kind of the same thing? Because people are like, oh, we don't want anything that'll distract. We just want a building that we can fit people in. We don't want anything that'll distract them. But so it's like, it's viewed as a bad thing to have, like a production, any amount of production when you're doing worship or doing a service.
Yeah.
But it's like, couldn't you
to step in?
Yeah, please. I'm kind of just
I think
fleshing this out.
Well, I would say the point of the architectural beauty, the stained glass, all of these things. And I don't want to diss like the fog machines. I think they're cool. They're fun.
I think they're really cool. Less, right? I'm still kind of figuring out what I think about it.
Yeah, I think I just qualify those two things in completely different categories, because the purpose of these intricate designs and this beautiful stained glass is to point you toward God.
Right.
Like the point of the architecture of a church building, and all of it is supposed to, and we see this in Catholic churches and Orthodox churches in the way we can tell Catholic theology and Orthodox theology by the design of their building. Like,
right.
Step inside a Catholic building, it's designed in the shape of a cross, and then on the walls you're going to see the stages of the cross. You're going to see the stained glass images of the Passion of Christ. And then you step inside an Orthodox church, and when you look up, you're going to see Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, it points you to Christ.
Yeah, aren't they kind of, the
Fog
Orthodox
machines
churches
don't do that.
They're sort of shaped like a dome, right?
Yeah, they have this dome, and then at the top of the dome they have a painting of Christ, and you
Yeah.
look up and you see Christ.
Yeah.
And
The fog machines don't do that.
Well, so it's interesting. I guess that's a very interesting point, and that does kind of change the way I'm thinking about this. But I think overall, I'm kind of thinking about the idea of like it's like you're creating a moment for people. So it's like when you walk into a building and you see like, oh my gosh, here are like these incredible stained glass windows that tell an incredible story. It's like that creates a moment of awe for me, of like, I'm standing in awe of who God is, and just the best that we can do to identify, to relate to that in some way.
Yeah.
The best we humanly can do. And And I feel like, in a sense, you could, again, it can be used wrongly. It's like, I feel like, in a sense, like, if you have, like, a good production, it can point you to a moment of, like, wow, this is, awe-inspiring of who God is. And you just happen to use some lights to get me there.
Yeah. Now, Trey, wasn't that a debate early on with churches that sort of created a separation of the using imagery or, like, creating the image of God? That
this was a big deal when the Protestant movement broke out. Oh, the Protestants fought about it all the time. I couldn't tell you anything about anything the Catholics or the Orthodox people were saying, but I know like Calvin and Zwingli and Luther got into it over this stuff because I couldn't really instrumentally, Zwingli was against instruments altogether. He was like, no instruments, they completely distract. And Calvin and Luther were more chill, if I remember correctly.
And it's funny how, I don't know, like, and maybe he had more, of an argument there, but it's even funny, like, you think about, like, the trumpets that you're going to hear, and it's like, there's all these references to sound and music and images that, all these visions and that the prophets had, or like, that Paul had, and you're reading these books in both the Old and New Testament that are very visual, very, descriptive, and inspire imagery in your mind. That then it's like, no. Like, we're not, we're not going to try and even tackle that in any sort of way.
Yeah, so I mean...
And I think that's...
Go for it, Trey. No, go for it.
No, I think that is to our demise that we think in those ways, because I don't think we realize how much of an effect that the arts have on us. Like, to me personally, the arts have a larger effect on me than sermons do, where they're just laying out the dogma of the religion of how we should live, right?
Yeah.
Things that affect me more are paintings and novels and music. Like, these things draw me closer to God.
Yeah. Well, so that's where I'm kind of going into it a little bit. So I'm glad you said that. That's a perfect segue. Kind
You're
of
welcome.
back into it's
Yeah,
like
you're welcome.
perfect. Like, back into media. So it's like, okay, so we see the effect that art has on people. Because there's the whole argument of like, oh, is it distractive or manipulative? It's like, oh, you can play this thing or you can, show this thing. It'll affect people a certain way. We know that it'll do that. And it's like we see the impact that media has. But then it's funny because it can also have the very negative impact.
Yeah.
So it's like if you, like you said, it's like art is more effective to you in a lot of ways than a sermon is. Because it's like instead of someone just being like A, B, you're just like show me some interest in intricate stuff in here. Whereas like a good movie can do that.
So this is something I was really excited to talk about. Is like
I was trying to tee it up for you.
Thank you. But yeah, so you're absolutely right in that experiences is really what kind of like shifts and makes us open our mind to things. So a great Christian film that we were talking about earlier is something like Silence, right? Martin Scorsese's film about Portuguese Catholic priests trying to spread the gospel in Japan, I think in the, I want to say like 1600s.
About that time, yeah.
So imagine if you distilled the message of this film down into a sermon, right? And you just were sitting there for 40 minutes in a church, and you had one guy sort of explaining this story to you and wrapping it up, in a message of like, and so you know what that means? Like, never... let go of your faith, like that's sort of like, and everybody kind of claps and says amen, and everybody like leaves, but now imagine spending almost 3 hours. The film's about 2 hours and 40 minutes. So imagine spending about 3 hours witnessing that, and it's beautifully photographed and beautifully acted, performed, and written piece of art that puts you in that situation, which is so much of what like preachers try and do, is they always try and bring you back to the suffering of Christ, and you guys really don't remember what it was like, and they're always trying to be descriptive and always trying to remind people like, no, this is how bad it was, right? So in the same way, that's what this film is trying to really show you. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, but what if it's like, okay, yeah, you say you wouldn't die, or you would die for Christ, or you would die for your faith. But now imagine, 6 other people are suffering, and you aren't. You're
Would
praying.
you let others die for your faith?
Yeah, and it's like, it's one thing to ask that question. Now let's explore it through art, through film, through performance. That experience is what can really open someone's mind. And you can tell, I get passionate about it, because that is the power of film, is this just attempt at having people have an experience that really can be mind-altering, and really can have people have this empathetic experience to someone else's viewpoint. And so with what you're saying about why is it that film can do that, or art can do that, but kind of sermons can't, I think that is the importance. And in the same way, outside of Christian media, secular media has the same problem. Have you ever heard of magician comedians or musician comedians?
No.
That was a big thing. Now, we talk about there's a lot of bad Christian media in the 90s. Well, to be fair, the 90s had a lot of bad experimentation. And one of the problems...
I mean, over every aspect. It wasn't just in the Christian realm.
And one of the problems was if you went in the world of stand-up comedy, you had musician comedians, and you had magician comedians.
I've never heard of them before.
Yeah, and it was a huge thing, magician comedians, and it was like, hey, you're not a really funny stand-up? Learn a magic trick. Oh, you're not a really good magician? Learn a dick joke. And that
to bleep that.
And that was a huge industry for a very short time, because it was a gimmick. That's what it was. It was a gimmick.
Yeah.
And in the same way, I can understand how certain critics would be like, oh, these things distract, right? Because at times they can be used to distract from a poor message, right? It's like, oh, God is great. God is great. Oh, I'm going to play this beautiful melody to kind of say, God is great. That can totally be done. And that could be a poor or a misuse of those artistic mediums. But you can also, at the same time, so a great example is I remember I was hearing one terrible bit of a comedian who's playing the piano and trying to make a very racist joke, and it was the joke does not work to begin with, on top of it being racist, bluntly, and then he's just saying this thing and then playing the piano, and then says something and then plays the piano, and it's just it's not
distract
it's
you from
so bad, it's so cringe. And that is the piano is being used there to distract from the joke. Or try and soften the edges of it. But then you have someone I don't know how familiar you are with Bo Burnham, but he's sort of a musician comedian, and he had that special that just got released on Netflix. It was Inside. I think it was Inside.
Yeah.
Inside. I watched it.
Yeah, that was great. And take the song that he does about Welcome to the Internet. That could be a comedic bit, but if it was just him being the internet's pretty crazy and, kind of blah, 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 it would not nearly have the same impact of this song that sort of helps and is used as an instrument, as a vehicle to guide you through these ideas. So it is reinforcing and improving a concept, not distracting from it. We're already over time, but
No, we're good.
So
just ignore the timer.
Yeah. So that's I think examples of how art could be used to distract. And maybe there were churches, I don't know. Maybe there were churches at that time that were using the arts to sort of distract a poor message. But that does not mean that art distracts from our God.
And I think that's where it depends on the usage of that too, where it's and this is what I think is beautiful about art, is that it can explore something that is an intangible in a way that makes it more tangible for us to understand that you couldn't get any other way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing to hear someone tell you a story, and it's something to hear someone really tell you a story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's one thing for me to be so yesterday I went to the store, and then another thing for me to be so yesterday I had this experience and blah, 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 and really like guide you through everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where
I would put.
I think that's where like a movie like Silence, which I haven't seen, but I've heard Daniel talk about it. It's like, that's where I think it's great because it reminds me of Job, and that's what I thought of when I was listening to it. It's like you have all these people removed from the situation, telling you like, we have Proverbs, very very simple, just good, bad bad, good bad bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Ecclesiastes like, I don't know, I'm gonna philosophize about it a little bit and like bad good bad sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you have Job who's like living this thing. He's like, check this out though.
Yeah.
And we see. What I was hearing when you were explaining this movie was like it's kind of walking you through that, like, what does real life look like?
Mm-hmm.
And since it's based on a real story as well, it's like we see that it's like this is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a reality that I could never, most likely I'll never experience in my life. It's like I will personally, most likely, 99% of the time, never have this experience. But I can watch this movie that was so masterfully made and have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that's the importance of art. It's like it can take you through this journey that you will most likely never have personally.
Yeah, I always say kind of filmmaking is a vehicle for empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way I wanted to phrase that was like through the arts, we can. There are certain realities that cannot, the best realities, honestly, that cannot be put into language, into words.
Yeah.
But they can be felt, and that is art. Art is the vessel for feeling these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feeling these realities. Like the art is a medium for feeling the goodness of God and the beauty of God. So they can be used to point us toward the divine, and I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I love this topic. It excites me.
I'm kind of a Paul the Builder over here. And so I'm like, how do we fix it? So like for you, how would you say we look at Christian media? And sure, there are some really, really great pieces, and there's some great musicians even that are creating really good stuff. But then there's like a majority that's like, it's not that good. And I'm picking on Christianity, Christian media in this sense. We could say the same thing about other, non-Christian art. But in the Christian art, it's like, how do we fix it? How does it get to a place where right now it's like when someone hears it, they're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
To a place where like, oh yeah, that's probably going to be good.
Well, I think that's something that art is trying to always do. At least, good art is like it is sort of tackling controversial questions and subjects, and that is definitely something that the Bible does, right? Is like a loving, all-powerful Creator during a war and strife and horror, like through the prophets' times and things like that. That Christian art, at least in the current state, is trying to provide a 40-minute sermon, into a 2-hour movie with a perfect, nice bow, finishing off the message at the end of the day. And they are a product that is supposed to be used as like a very simple devotional sort of device that can be spread through churches. I know that was one of the reasons that the Passion of Christ was like such a popular and financially successful film, was that Christians were able to use it to do like devotionals and stuff and like do showings of it at churches. And then so with that, that's where I think you get the industry of films like PureFlix. What I want to see more of is things like PureFlix, or any. I think I use them as like, because that's just what I keep
They're the go-to. Yeah.
They're the go-to. But any Christian media that sort of falls in that, whether it's music or film or any other medium, they are trying to just go to the parts of the Bible that like we think that we clearly understand, and we can put a pin in it, and it's like, this is the message, and we're going to make a movie about it. I want to see more approaches like Silence, which I would put on par of like a book like Ecclesiastes or Job, right?
Yeah.
Where it is like, let's explore these ideas in a realistic setting, and you know what? We might not walk away with a true answer or like a solid bow, but it inspires empathy in these situations, and it does try and explore them in attempts of an answer. And it's okay to walk away with not something that you can write down in one sentence, you know?
Yeah.
We believe in, like, this being that is indescribable, you know, incomprehensible, and yet pastors for decades, if not centuries, have been trying to distill him down into 40 minutes.
Yeah. And I think
The indescribable God in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
a series that is 40-part sermon.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's interesting about all of this as well. When I think about it, is that we're trying to make things too simple, it seems to be a theme on our podcast. That concept, when it's like that's where I think Christian media, I'll even go as far as say, has failed in a lot of ways. We're like we've missed the original point of like how do you try to take reality, how do you try to take intangibles, something that is so indescribable, and try to describe it. And we've settled with like, well, there was a flood, and there was a bunch of Noahs, and there were a bunch of animals on an ark, and there was a rainbow. Done.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, people died. Like, even if however you take it, it's like we look at the story. It's like this is a grotesque story.
It's a brutal story, and we're teaching it to children all the time.
Yeah.
It's the first story we teach them.
Look at all these happy giraffes.
Yeah. Look at everybody squeezed on this little ark. We're all good. And
that's where I think it's like we're missing that part of discipleship. And that's why I think, I'm speaking very generally here, it's like we look at churches. We're so focused on the mega church idea. How do we fit all these people in this big building we created?
Yeah.
How do we get them all in here? And what are we actually teaching them?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we see this like mass exodus of a lot of people growing up in the church then leaving, because they're like, well, you're not dealing with any of the problems I actually have. And that's where I think we see that's where that needs to kind of take over more, is like, let's try to explore these ideas. You know, these things that people deal with and struggle with that can't really be explained. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. There's a big effort of saving face, I think, with Oh, sorry if you have something to say.
Yeah, I want Daniel to talk to mostly.
Yeah.
He's our guest, right?
It's true.
But I do want to say, I think it's a theological problem, and I have no idea how much time we have over here. But
So
it's
we've got
a
like 8
theological
minutes left.
problem.
Annie's telling us to wrap up. And
All right, I'll give 2
minutes,
minutes, and then we'll focus on Daniel completely.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the Christian media right now is a problem of theology. It is a lack of it's. I don't want to just completely berate the evangelical church, but there's a lack of depth in the evangelical church right now.
Yeah.
And they want to make good feeling movies, right? And that's not what we need. We need to be thrown into the depths of the seas and to experience the human condition in all of its ways. We can't just have a Sunday resurrection movie. We need to have the death on Friday and the complete unknowingness of Saturday. Like, our Savior is dead, and we don't know if we don't think he'll rise again. Actually, we're actually really sad because we have no hope. We are hopeless. And Christian media right now lacks the hope, and that's why people like Karl Marx would say stuff like religion is the opium of the masses. It's we come to the faith just to feel good rather than to actually feel the depths of the human condition. So and it's at its peak worst right now, I think. Yeah,
there's like this market inefficiency.
Yeah.
We have a huge demand for help me deal with the suffering that I have. And we have the supply of Hallmark movies.
I was going to say, like, the word to describe is Hallmark, you know. And I think that Christian theology throughout the centuries, as far as I understand it, you know, has tried to grapple with these questions. And it is sort of a conclusion of the Protestant evangelical, specifically like U.S. sort of, you know, like you can get very narrow of like our experience of that being very shallow, like you're talking about, and a lack of depth.
Sure.
But historically, and I think this is what gives me hope and gives me inspiration, is that it has been the catalyst to sort of start these very theological questions, and sort of, there were popes and stuff trying to grapple with them in the past. And at the end of the day, to use an outside example to sort of like, again, give us hope, is that in mathematics, I believe in the early 1900s, there was a huge debate sort of on infinity and all these sort of like concepts that were kind of unknown. There were certain people that there were like a split throughout. A lot of people were like, oh, mathematics is known. Like that's something that like everyone can agree on. And it's like, no, within mathematics, there was this huge split like a century ago of people like kind of arguing on the concepts of infinity. And there were like very, very like stern beliefs that were made, and entire like theses written on like, no, it cannot be this way, it must be this way.
That's wild.
Yeah, and it was, oh my gosh, when I remember my mathematics tutor in college and high school and stuff, she always talked about it. She's like, oh, you think mathematics is like a known, science? She's like, just go to any convention with mathematics or with mathematicians, and she's like, you'll just find all sorts of debate. But from these arguments on infinity, it birthed, computer science. It was the foundation for why we have this that's in our hands right now. And so even though there are these concepts where physicists would say that the idea of infinity doesn't exist, it's just sort of a concept, the arguments about it, the debates that have been made about it, have birthed like some of the most important, inventions of our time. And so in that, it is important to tackle these ideas, like you're saying. It is important to explore them, even if to this day we think, oh, infinity is like this idea that like everybody, every mathematician just sort of, it's a symbol that people write on a whiteboard, right? It's not. It's still debated to this day, but from it has come so much progress. In that same way, I think there is value in kind of diving headfirst into trying to answer these questions with no answer in sight, right? That full just sort of existential dread or whatever on the Saturday, of like, I don't see the light yet, and I'm trying to figure it out right now. There's absolutely value in trying to explore those ideas, and I think. So I wanted to finish off the episode sort of talking about good examples of Christian media.
So we've got like 1 minute left, so let's close the tab on this.
All right.
Daniel, I'm going to let you have the last words, if you're okay with that, Trey.
Sure.
All right. So I did want to use this example because and I knew I was going to do the same thing as like hound on Christian media and lack of depth right now. I think, I want to recommend some great artists that people go listen to right now. As far as music is concerned, I think artists like the Grey Havens and Josh Garrels are two good examples of Christian artists trying to create poetry and music that is inspired by Scripture. When I listen to it, obviously sometimes it is trying to say something. Of course, it should. But it's not trying to preach. It's trying to find a beauty in the messages from the Bible. And so I'd really recommend, again, the Grey Havens and Josh Garrels, I think, are two beautiful examples of that, where I listen to that music outside of like, oh, I feel kind of like I need to listen to some Christian media right now. And it inspires me. It creates a sense of awe in me. And then as far as films go, I think the number one example right now is Silence by Martin Scorsese. I think anyone who's willing to watch a very difficult and very adult film should watch it and study it. Fair warning there going into that.
Where can we find some of your stuff?
Oh, yeah. So my stuff, you can check out Get the Pics. That's the company that I've worked with in Ohio, and we've produced several feature films. I've been the cameraman and cinematographer on 2 of them, and they are examples of Christians making media, not Christian media, but I think there's definitely themes in there that you can take away from it, and I would definitely, of course, recommend that you go check them out at getthepics.org. And then as well, with everything we've been talking about, I currently have projects at Crispy Hippo that you can check out, including actually a horror film that I'll be working on with another Christian artist. And that tackles very nebulous ideas about truth and trying to find your way in an ever-changing world and having values and a framework, but one that is dynamic and ever-changing. That will be coming out within the next couple months. So yeah, that's some examples.
That's cool. Yeah, there's so much left to this topic, I feel like, which is always always the problem we have with most of these episodes. And it's like, yeah, there's so much more, but I would say you're doing Christian media. That's what you're working toward. You might not be you are a Christian. You might not be making explicit Christian content. But you're exploring life and you're exploring just the reality that we live inside of, which I would say is probably one of the most Christian things someone could do. So Trey, do you have anything to finish us off with?
I just loved having Daniel on the show. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I'd love to continue this conversation in the future.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I had so many more things I wanted to ask him and say.
There's so much more.
Yeah.
It's true. But hey, thank you so much to Maximize Digital Media and Annie Lee for producing this episode. Thank you for Daniel for coming on this and
absolutely.
Just
this was a pleasure.
Talking away, and it's a good time. We like to jump all over the place, and I wish we could go for more time.
I want to go for like 2 more hours.
Oh, we easily have 2 more hours in here,
Yeah.
But Annie would hate us. But yeah, thank you so much. I want to have you on again. Trey, it's always a beauty to see you.
It's good to see you guys.
Trey, you're looking.
We're
like
still
11
figuring
out of
this
10
out.
right now.
I'm gonna see Trey in the flesh
Hey,
pretty
appreciate
soon, which I'm excited for.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I can't wait.
And we'll continue it.
All right. So, well, we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.